All right, let's take a look at another one. I'm going to throw this to Frank first because this is like two things can be true. This is the hot take version of that. These are two hot takes that maybe both can be true. The Eagles could win the Super Bowl, or the Eagles could fire their coach by Halloween. Frank, what say you?
Hoo-wee. I just posted the Eagles preview today, and it was a roller coaster. I mean, there is no team that I'm more confused about than the Philadelphia Eagles in that this team was a stretch of 31 games where they won 26 of them, going back to the beginning of the 2022 season. They were 26-5, including a loss in the Super Bowl there. That includes playoffs. Then suddenly, without any warning whatsoever, they become one of the 5 worst teams of football. And I just can't shake that, where the Eagles look so bad. This was not just the Bills early last season where they're losing a lot of close games and their record wasn't good. This was a team that was blowing 21-6 leads to the Arizona Cardinals at home. Like stuff like that, getting absolutely boat raced by the Buccaneers in the playoffs. I don't know how to
Cardinals
reconcile
like
this.
that most excited team in 2024.
They're very exciting, that game. That was a great game. But I just don't know where I am with the Eagles. I look at their roster and I'm like, this is still the same roster we gushed about all off season last year. But it's still the same coaching staff, or not the same coaching staff, it's the same head coach, and a lot of the same issues that I don't know necessarily were resolved. Nick Sirianni basically gave up all control. Kellen Moore's going to run the offense. Vic Fangio's going to run the defense. He's just kind of a CEO now. And once you start doing that, and once you start firing coordinators, there's only one more move to make, and that's getting rid of the head coach. So Sirianni comes into the season. He's a lame duck. If this team is 2-6 by Halloween, he's getting fired. Like, that's just how it is. And then Kellen Moore or Vic Fangio will take over. So I don't know what to make of the Eagles. I think all these things could be true, that they have Super Bowl upside and they have the ability to be the first team fire their head coach.
Yeah, I was in Tampa for the Eagles playoff loss to the Buccaneers, and that locker room concerned me, not because everyone was crying and this and that, but because there just seemed to be so many people who were not on the same page, whether they supported Nick Sirianni, who are not on the same page of whether Jalen Hurts is going to be the guy. Like, I can see them going on to win the Super Bowl if they can figure it out together. If Jalen goes off and has a year like he did 2 years ago, I think that will really spark the team. But going back to what you said, Frank, players see what happens when the organization makes changes. And while last year they did have 2 new coordinators that influenced them, that was 2 new coordinators because the coordinators were getting head coaching jobs because they had made it to a Super Bowl. To know, hey, neither our offense nor defense were good enough last year. We have 2 new guys, and so we have this learning curve and also this sort of morale hit. I think that can be really, really difficult to rebound from. And so I think Nick Sirianni will have earned his extension if they are able to turn this around. But I think that you just have a lot of questions. And you always have general manager Howie Roseman looming in the background being like, I gave you this. Saquon's an awesome person, and his ceiling as a player, really, really high. But I think there's a reason why no one else in the league is paying running backs, but the Eagles just decided to pay Saquon. I mean, I don't know if you guys are watching the Hard Knocks for the Giants, and I actually don't watch all of these documentary things, but this Giants Hard Knocks is really impressing me with the level of access and like actual interesting content really that they're getting. And you saw some of what they're seeing with Saquon and what the Giants' decisions were going to be, particularly but allowing him to leave to a division rival. And again, one of the things that Joe Shane talked about on that episode was, hey, well, what could Saquon do with an offensive line like what they have in, I think it was Detroit and Philly were the 2. He said, well, is the offensive line in Philly what it used to be? Like, yes, they still have talent. Yes, they still have the best offensive line coach in the league. But losing Jason Kelce is a really big deal for Jalen Hurts. So I just think there are so many question marks, whereas a year ago it was like, yeah, it makes sense that they should be a favorite again. This year, there's so much up in the air.
But you'd agree, Jori, you'd agree that this team could win a Super Bowl. Like, there's... Yeah, right? Like, I mean, you look at their roster.
They still have insane amounts of talent. Right. Because on the other hand, let's say Saquon stays healthy, and then you have the Saquon, Jalen. Well, Jalen's got the mobility that plays really well off the running game. Both of them can play off the offensive line. Oh, by the way, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, it's still unclear how Howie is paying all of these guys. And by the way, even though I gave him a hard time about paying a running back, if you actually look at the cap numbers, I have no clue when they're paying Saquon because it's not hitting the cap this year, let me tell you that. But yeah, I think both sides of the ball still have a lot. But then I'm like, no, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Graham's in his final year. Like
Fletcher Cox retired.
Right, Fletcher Cox retired. There's a lot going on. Fitz, what do you think about the Eagles?
So here's the thing. I think the Eagles, pull up a chair, kids. I think the Eagles are a cautionary tale. That's our listeners. I'm talking to our listeners. But by the way, I mean, Jori, not for nothing. I am old enough to be your dad, so I'm allowed to say these things.
Guys, I got old this week.
How old did you get?
30.
Did okay,
God.
well,
Whatever. Anyway.
It's close on being. I mean, it's close
I'm
on
like
being.
a real adult now.
Wow. Okay. Congratulations.
Sure.
Welcome. By the way, my 30s were great. My 40s have been even better. Here's the thing.
Frank, anything to say about your 50s or 60s? Just kidding.
No.
Kidding.
Oh my God.
Hey. I do have a 20-year-old daughter. So, hey, whatever. Turning 30. Yeah, you're really old there, Jori. Whatever.
Carry on.
I think there's a cautionary tale out there, kids, for the Houston Texans with the Philadelphia Eagles, because we were so convinced that the Texans, or that the Eagles, I should say, had built something that was about to become a juggernaut and it was about to take over, and Jalen Hurts was the answer. And oh my God, look at how good this is, and look at the vibe. Everybody talked about how that team was so special a couple of years ago. The defensive line was great. Like, they had all of these things that you were like, these are building blocks. Eagles are going to be good for a long time. And now it just feels like the whole thing is in disarray. Like, I think right now, Jalen Hurts is actually being doubted by most of the general NFL public. And that's wild to me, because a year ago, it was, oh my God, Philly fans would have just absolutely eviscerated you for saying anything negative about Jalen Hurts. So I do think that, like, this is a reminder for everybody right now that's sitting here saying the Texans could end up being the second best team in the AFC. Well, it's a little bit of an Eagles thing to me.
Changes fast.
I think we moved the goalposts too much when they were really good a couple of years ago, and now they got to find a way to normalize it. I don't think they're a Super Bowl team. I think they have a lot to fix on the defensive side of the ball, and I think the Kelsey subtraction is going to be massive for them. So I don't think they're a Super Bowl team. I think they're a heck of a lot closer to watching their head coach get fired at Halloween than they are to actually hoisting the Lombardi Trophy.
I'm about to get really meta and give you a 2 things can be true about our 2 things can be true. 2 things can be true. You are correct that there's that much change in the NFL at all times, and nothing is as stable and like continuous as we think. I also do not agree with your comparison of Jalen Hurts and the Eagles to CJ Stroud and the Texans, because the Eagles are on their 3rd offensive coordinator and 3rd defensive coordinator in 3 years, and the Texans have not yet lost them. So I think your comparison would make more sense next year if they lose their guys. But they kept their coaches, and so I think they still have the stability and only added, didn't lose, to who they have in their building to go chase it.
That is a very fair point. And I think you are very right about that. Certainly a difference. Look at us. Like, we're having, like, what is this kid? We need to coin this as a new, like, debate show. Like, what is it if everybody's
true? Everything is awesome.
It's like, I don't know how do we term this, but it's absolutely beautiful the way it's going down.